Hello there, I'm Jimmy Vegas, and today I am going to rank all the physical Resident Evil games that I currently own. Yes, I know all of this could have been digitally on websites, you know what they are, you've seen them, but where's the fun? You know, we've got some Lego pieces there that say SABCD. Why not do it this way? It's fun. Anyway, let's get into it. Let's start with the hardest Resident Evil that we're going to have to rank here. That's Resident Evil Origins Collection. Now, the reason that this is the hardest one to rank is because there is an obvious S rank and an obvious not an S rank. Resident Evil Remake is just peak. It's just epic. It is one of the greatest games ever created, even 2 decades later. But Resident Evil 0 isn't. Resident Evil 0 is good. I love Resident Evil 0, but it's just not on par with the remake. So we can't put this in S tier, so we've got to establish what this is. I think this really is a C tier. I'm going to have to be brutal because there are much better Resident Evil games than 0. There really are, but there aren't many more better games than the remake. So where can we put this? You know, S or C? Well, either A or B, so I think we'll put it in B for now. Let's see if we can... Oh, well, that was terrible, wasn't it? All right, well, lucky for us, we have this. Yeah, the GameCube version of Resident Evil 0. So obviously, you know, I said it was going to be a C, so let's put this in a C. It would make sense, wouldn't it? But then lucky for us again, we have this. Oh, wow, look at our reflection there. Look at the reflection on that. So yeah, Resident Evil, the S tier. Shadow of Doubt, S tier. And if you disagree, you're wrong. Now, I don't have any of the original trilogy. I stupidly sold a lot of my games years ago, long before I started properly collecting. So we're going to go with the Resident Evil 2 remake. This is S tier, without shadow of a doubt. Now, the original Resident Evil 2, I will say, is probably only an A tier. I own it digitally, but not physically, so that's why it's not in here. But this is S tier. You can disagree if you want, but Resident Evil 2 remake is... peak. Again, it is just absolutely perfect. It is brilliant, and I love the remake. So naturally, S tier. Resident Evil 3 remake. Again, I don't have the original physical of this, but the remake for Resident Evil 3, I really, really loved. It was brilliant, but it was nowhere near as good as 2. I admit it was shorter. There was content cut. It was disappointing in that sense. The original Resident Evil 3 is probably A or B for me. So to put this in A wouldn't make sense. So I think this has got to go straight in B. Next up, we have 3 games which are technically the same, but they're not. Resident Evil 4. Now, this is the original release of Resident Evil 4 on GameCube. And I played this to death, just over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And this was like 20 years ago. This is fabulous. It's not quite S tier. I'm going to be honest, because it's not, for me, it's not my favourite Resident Evil. It never has been my favourite Resident Evil. It never will be my favourite Resident Evil. But it's close and it's good. And because of that, it's got to be at least A. Is that still coming? Yeah, we can still see that on the camera. Next up is the re-release version. There's lots of versions of this everywhere. I try not to collect too much of Resident Evil 4, so I just stuck with this version. And look, it's a bit better than that version in terms of what it is, but it's the same game. You know, there's nothing drastically different, so it's still got to be A. It wouldn't make sense to put that in a different tier. This one, however, clearly has to go in a different tier because Resident Evil 4 Remake is the remake we all thought we didn't need, but when it came out, we knew we needed it. This is fantastic, and if this is anything to go by for the future Resident Evil, I think we're in good hands. Clear S tier. Next up, the original Resident Evil, well, not quite the original, this is the gold edition. It's got the DLC and all that. But it's fundamentally the original Resident Evil 5, that is. Brilliant game. Really, really good. It was a bit different for me when I was younger playing it because it just didn't quite feel... you could see Resident Evil was starting to take its turn, but that didn't matter. I think it was a really, really good game. Not as good as 4. Obviously not as good as others. So I think this is probably an easy B tier. The reason I'm going to show this one now is because this is technically the same game, but it's a bit different. It's like the Resident Evil 4 re-release, although it's, you know, pretty much the same game. So I think it's obvious that this is going straight in B. And Resident Evil 6 is next. Look, I know you're all expecting me to just go, oh, D. But you know what? No, sorry. I am one of these people that truly believes Resident Evil 6 is better than people made out to be. It was what first got me thinking about people jumping on bandwagons, and just, I didn't agree with it. I thought this was a really good game. I know it wasn't what people wanted. It was not like other Resident Evils. It was too much fluff, too much faffing around, too much. I get it. But for all intents and purposes, I liked the game. I thought it was good. So for me, Resident Evil 6 is not D. Look, it isn't the best Resident Evil. I think I'm going to have to put it in C. It was okay. I can't say it's better than 0. You know, them two games are probably the two which are most disliked, but neither of them are D games. You've got, come on. You can't be saying that. And same with this. This is obviously the re-release of that version a couple of years later. And this version does include the Maps multiplayer DLC, but that was the problem. It's like, you're forcing this multiplayer. Nah. But that was the thing to do at the time. So it's still got to go in C. So let's take a break from mainline at the moment, and let's go with Resident Evil Revelations. This is really, really good. I love Revelations. I think it's a really, really good series. It's a shame there's not more of them. But this one is the one that you play as Jill, and Chris is in it, and it's on the ship. Really, really good, this. This felt like a return to kind of more survival horror feel, which I really, really liked. I thought it was a really, really good idea. So this, for me, I think B. And the reason why I think it's B is because Revelations 2, I feel, was even better. It improved on that formula. For me, it was better than Revelations. So if I was going to put Revelations in A, I would have had to put this in S tier. But this is not an S tier game. So that's why Revelations, the original, has had to go in B, because this has got to go in A. Next, Resident Evil Biohazard. And I think we all know where this is going, don't we? I'm playing. No. This is actually a really, really good game. For me, I was quite surprised when it first came out, announced, I should say, and it was first person. I think I got taken aback, just like everyone else, thinking, oh, Resident Evil first person. I'm not sure about that. But you know what? It worked, and it was absolutely fantastic. It felt like a modern return to the original Resident Evil, and that's why it worked. It just brought back a lot of the atmosphere, and it was good. And because it was first person, I mean, have you played this in VR? Wow. If you've not, get a PS4, get a PSVR, buy it and play it in VR. It's really good. It's not quite S tier. It's A tier. Finally, the last Resident Evil game that I currently own, at least, is Village. This is brilliant. Like, this is just miles ahead of 7. I mean, I can't even describe just how much I think this game stands head and shoulders above some of the other Resident Evils. It's an obvious S tier, so I'm going to put it right there now. And the reason I think it's an S tier is because, not because of the style, you know, it was a Village, and it was like the precursor to Resident Evil 4, you know, with Capcom trying to see if people would want a Village so they could try Resident Evil, you know, all that malarkey. But it just felt more in line with where Resident Evil should be going, because you can't do the same game over and over and over and over and over. That's why Resident Evil has changed over the years. That's why it's evolved and it's morphed. I mean, Resident Evil 9, when it comes out, it won't be first person, it'll have evolved again. But I feel it will probably evolve into something like Resident Evil 6, and it won't be as good as what we hoped. But that's irrelevant, because we're not here to rank that. We're here to rank what we have there. And I think that's a solid ranking. If you disagree with it, let me know. But Resident Evil Remake, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 4, and Resident Evil 8, or Village, I think are clear S tiers. There are no other Resident Evil games that can blow them out the water. They are peak and always will be. And if Resident Evil Village and Resident Evil 4 set the future for Resident Evil as a series, we are in good hands. We're in for some good games. Let's just hope they kind of ignore some of these lower C-tier ones, but there are rumours of a Resident Evil 0 remake, which, maybe if that comes out, that might be a situation where we have the original Resident Evil 0 in C, but we have the remake in something like A, who knows. Anyway, let me know what you think of the ranking. By all means, you can tell me I'm completely wrong. Like I said, opinions are like 3.14 onions. Doesn't really matter. See you in the next one.